At Dad's funeral, my brother claimed, she only wants money. Dad cut her off. Lawyer brought a USB. Dad's video played, saying 3 words: she inherits all. The envelope had no return address, just my name, Anna Thompson, scrawled in my father's stiff handwriting. I almost tossed it with the junk mail, but something stopped me. My fingers shook as I opened it, bracing for I didn't know what. It was a funeral invitation. My father was dead. I stared at the paper, waiting for shock, grief, anger, anything. But I felt nothing, just a heavy stillness. It had been 10 years since I'd heard from the Thompson family, a decade since I left Savannah, Georgia, escaping their judgment, their cold shoulders, their cutting words. They'd made it clear I wasn't theirs anymore. I remembered the day I walked away. My son, Ethan, was a baby, strapped into the back seat of my beat-up sedan, while I drove with a swollen lip and a suitcase stuffed with diapers and onesies. I'd finally left the man who broke more than my body. But when I turned to my father for help, he gave me shame. "You made your bed," he said. That was it. I didn't crumble. I built a new life in Raleigh, North Carolina, small, quiet, safe. I got a job shelving books at the local library, read Ethan bedtime stories, learned to breathe again. And though my father never reached out, never apologized, I sent money every month through Mr. Jenkins, the old neighbor. I made sure he had what he needed, never telling a soul, not even Ethan. Now, holding this letter, I wondered, why invite the daughter you threw away? Ethan, 10 years old and wiser than his years, saw my face and asked, "You going, Mom?" My throat tightened. I didn't answer, just stared at the crisp white paper. Then he said, "Maybe he left more than a will. Maybe he left something for you." I looked at my son, my anchor, and something shifted. I didn't know what awaited me, but I needed to hear whatever was left unsaid. So I folded the letter, packed our bags, and prepared to return to the place I swore I'd never see again. The chapel in Savannah was smaller than I remembered, its wooden beams and muted stained glass dulled by a gray sky. It should have felt holy, but the air was thick, sour with old perfume and older grudges. I walked through the double doors, Ethan's small hand tied in mine. Heads turned before we reached the aisle. Whispers sparked. Some didn't hide their shock, others stared like I was a ghost. Then I saw them, my sister, Claire, and brother, David, near the front, dressed in flawless black, grief painted on like stage makeup, just enough to show, not enough to smudge. Claire's eyes found mine first, flashing disbelief before curling into a sharp smirk. "Well, well," she said, loud enough for nearby pews to hear, "guess the runaway thinks there's cash left." David chuckled, but his eyes held only the same judgment I'd grown up with. I didn't respond. I kept walking, spine straight, eyes forward, though every instinct screamed to run. Ethan and I took seats in the last pew, far from their orbit. I wasn't here for them or their drama. I was here to say goodbye. Ethan gripped my hand, his fingers trembling. I whispered, "It's okay, buddy. We're just here to sit." But it wasn't okay. The preacher began, his voice droning through prayers and hollow eulogies. My name wasn't mentioned. They skipped from Dad's early years to Claire's tireless care, David's sacrificial trips home. The story was polished, edited, with me cut out. Ethan rested his head on my shoulder, quiet. I stared ahead, my ears burning from every snicker behind a tissue, every sideways glance. I wasn't crying, not because I didn't care, but because I'd shed all my tears years ago. When the service ended, people filed out. A few passed without looking. An old cousin gave a stiff nod, then turned away. Claire brushed by like I was invisible. David paused just long enough to murmur, "Didn't think you'd have the nerve to show." I met his gaze, unflinching. Neither did I. He smirked. "Don't get cozy. This isn't your story anymore." He walked off, and I sat frozen, Ethan's head still against me, his hand the only real thing in that room. They didn't know I wasn't here to rewrite their story. I was here to end it. The Thompson family home hadn't changed, same white columns, same red brick, same ivy strangling the porch. Stepping inside after 10 years felt like entering a freezer, cold, sterile, wrong. Guests mingled, cousins, neighbors, Dad's old business partners. I recognized most faces, but none met my eyes. Their voices dropped to whispers when I entered, each glance like a needle. Claire stood by the fireplace, swirling white wine like she was at a gala, not a funeral. David leaned beside her, one hand in his blazer pocket, the other holding red wine, both looking more like party hosts than grieving kids. When they saw me with Ethan, David's mouth twisted into a grin. "This won't take long," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "She got cut out years ago." A few guests chuckled awkwardly, others studied the walls. I didn't bite. I kept my coat on, the fire's warmth not reaching me. Ethan stayed close, his fingers tight around mine, his eyes scanning the room like he'd learned to read tension from years of surviving storms. We sat at the back of the parlor, away from the hearth and wine. I glanced at the framed photos on the walls, Claire in college, David on a yacht, family trips to Myrtle Beach. Not one of me, not even from childhood. I wasn't surprised. I'd been erased with surgical precision. Claire caught my eye and smiled, a cold, territorial smile. "Sit if you want, Anna," she said, syrupy. "But don't expect a share." I gave her nothing. Ethan looked up, his face not scared or confused, but focused, like he was waiting for something. And somehow, I knew he was right. The room hushed when the front door creaked open. James Carter, Dad's lawyer, stepped in, gray suit crisp, leather briefcase in hand, and under his arm a polished cedar box. Claire barely glanced up from her wine. David checked his watch, impatient. "Thank you for being here," Carter said, his voice low but firm. "Per Thompson's wishes, we'll start with a video message before the will." The air tightened. "A video?" Claire scoffed. "Can't we just read the will? We know what's in it." David nodded. "Yeah, let's not drag this out. Some of us have flights." Carter didn't budge. He set the cedar box on the coffee table by the fireplace, opened his briefcase, and said, "It was your father's express wish this be viewed first." Claire rolled her eyes. David muttered something. A few cousins leaned forward, curious. I stayed quiet, but Ethan sat up straighter, his grip on my hand easing. I glanced at him, and his face glowed with quiet hope, like he'd been waiting for this longer than I had. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. The screen flickered, then focused. There was Dad, older, thinner, his proud shoulders slumped, his sharp eyes softened by a weight I couldn't name. He sat at his old oak desk, a marsh painting behind him, same as always. He looked into the camera. "If Anna's watching this," he began, voice gravelly, "I owe you the apology I never gave." The room froze. I was wrong. I judged you for leaving a marriage I didn't understand. I thought you were weak, selfish. I believed what was easier than asking questions I wasn't ready to hear. He paused, fingers twitching, a nervous tick I'd never seen. "When you showed up that night, bruised, shaking, with Ethan in your arms, I should have opened the door, pulled you inside, said, 'You're safe.' But I didn't." Pride spoke louder than love. A lump rose in my throat. Ethan's fingers folded into mine. I didn't look away from the screen. I told myself I was teaching you responsibility, but I was punishing you for choosing yourself, for being stronger than I ever taught you to be. Chairs shifted behind me, someone exhaled loudly. I didn't turn. "I found out the truth, Anna," he said. "A few years ago, Jenkins brought an envelope, said it was from a friend covering the heating bill. I knew your handwriting. You sent money every month for years, quietly, no credit, no contact, just care. Even when I gave you nothing, when I pretended you didn't exist, you never stopped being my daughter, even when I stopped being your father." My breath caught. Tears burned, falling silently. I blinked hard, but they kept coming. "I watched you from a distance," he went on. "Jenkins told me about the library, about Ethan. Said he's bright, sees the world like you, with patience." He smiled, small and tired, and it broke me. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Anna. But if I can leave you anything, it's this: I was wrong. You were right. You protected your son, walked away from pain, built something better." He took a shaky breath. "I've changed the will. They don't know yet, but they will." Gasps erupted. Someone cursed. Claire shifted sharply, David's jaw tightened. I barely heard them. "All I ever wanted was to be proud of my children," he said. "And I am of you, the woman you became when I wasn't looking." The screen dimmed, then lit up with his final words, "Tell Ethan thank you for giving me one last chance to be a father, even from a distance." Then it went black. Silence fell, thicker than grief. For the first time in 10 years, I heard my father clearly. The screen was barely dark when murmurs began, confusion, anger, denial. Carter didn't wait. He adjusted his glasses, opened his folder, and said, "The video provides context. Now, per Mr. Thompson's revised, notarized, and legally binding will, I'll read the allocations." Claire let out a sharp breath, bracing for battle. David folded his arms, smug, like the video was irrelevant. "To my daughter, Anna Elaine Thompson," Carter began, "I leave the Savannah family residence, its contents, and surrounding land in full." The room turned to me, neck snapping, disbelief in every eye. My hands froze in my lap, Ethan's still in mine. Carter continued, in addition, I leave to Anna Thompson $250,000 in liquid assets and all remaining balances in my retirement savings. The air shifted. He wasn't done. To her son, Ethan Thompson, I leave a college education trust of $100,000. Ethan blinked up at me, mouth slightly open, processing. I was still catching up. Carter flipped to the final page. To my son, David, and daughter, Claire, I leave a collection of family photo albums, my old military compass, and the Bible my mother gave me at 18. A gasp broke the silence. Claire shot to her feet. What? Her voice was shrill, trembling. That's impossible. There's a mistake. No mistake, Carter said, unfazed. Your father amended the will 2 years ago. It's certified, witnessed, and registered with the county. David stood, jaw clenched. He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly, Carter replied, closing the folder with a snap. He paused, then read a handwritten note. Let them remember who showed up when it mattered, who stayed quiet but never stopped loving. This house belongs to the one who never asked for anything and gave anyway. Claire stormed out. David followed, disbelief trailing him like smoke. I didn't move, not from shock, but because for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel erased. I felt chosen. You tricked him, Claire snapped, spinning toward me, wine glass forgotten in her hand. No way he changed it himself. You must have, her accusation choked off. I stood still. The video had said enough. You manipulated him, she shouted, face red with rage. After all you did to us, you waltz in acting like a saint. Pathetic. Ethan flinched, and I rested a hand on his shoulder, grounding myself. We'll challenge it, David growled. He wasn't well. Confused. Carter didn't blink. The will was amended 2 years before his health declined. It's airtight. The room stilled. Cousins whispered, some slipping out, coats clutched, avoiding my eyes, not from hate now, but guilt, maybe shame. Claire's breathing was ragged. She slammed her wine glass on the sideboard. This is a joke, she muttered, then left. David followed, his jaw tight enough to crack. The room emptied. They thought they'd buried me 10 years ago. Now they were the ones running. The parlor was quiet now, not tense, but settled. I stayed seated, Ethan beside me, his grip loose but steady. No one else remained. Voices faded down the hall, doors clicked shut, footsteps vanished. I rose and walked to the old leather reading chair by the bay window, faded and creaky, shaped by Dad's years in it. I brushed my fingers along its edge. Goodbye, Dad, I whispered. I forgive you. The words didn't catch or burn. They just landed, like they'd been waiting. Ethan didn't speak, but he didn't need to. The fireplace's soft crackle cast a warm glow over the room, the photos, the floorboards. It felt different, not hostile, but calm, like a home that had exhaled. Maybe some ghosts don't leave. They just wait for the right words. Weeks later, the house was quiet in a new way, not stormy, but peaceful. Ethan claimed the sunroom for his art, sketching cardinals and wrens from the backyard trees. His laughter filled the halls, soft and bright, healing old aches. One morning, a letter arrived, plain white, no return address, but I knew Mr. Jenkins' handwriting. Anna, it read, the day he realized it was you, I'd never seen your father so small. He carried that truth to the end. I folded it and stepped onto the porch. Ethan sat on the steps, sketch pad out, shading a hawk's wings. I looked over the lawn, oaks swaying in the breeze. He saw me in the end, I said, to no one in particular. The girl they erased hadn't vanished. She'd just been waiting for the truth to find its way home.